Well, thanks for tuning in for our Pride Preview Show. Nashville Pride 2022 promises to be one for the record books. All vendor space and all parade entries sold out way in advance. Joining the conversation out and about today's Brent Meredith, and I have to say, happy Pride and so good to be back in studio with you.
Happy Pride. It is great to be here. Look, we're in the same room at the same time.
Oh my gosh, we're making progress.
No, we are. No masks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So nice. Great to see you in person here in studio. Love that. Now, we're going to talk about Nashville Pride, but I also want to ask you, do you remember your first Pride and where it was?
I remember it very well, yes. It was Atlanta Pride around 2000. I remember going because we were ecstatic to be there, first of all, because I'd never been to a Pride. Atlanta, as you well know, and I know you've been, is enormous. Even back then, hundreds of thousands of people. And we remember, or I remember thinking, those of us that were there, like, Nashville deserves this. We deserve something as good as this, if not better. So we came back and got involved just that next year, around 2001. So going well over 20 years now, yeah, and it was just such an experience to be there, to be seen, to be out, to be walking around the booths, the people, the parade. I can still close my eyes and see things. I've got the photos, you know, I stumbled across those the other day and thought, man, that's just incredible. And then my first Nashville Pride was again later that next year, 2001, just before we got involved. It was at where it is now, over at the Bicentennial Mall, but there were no trees, you know, it was completely flat. There was maybe 150 people there, and just a crazy juxtaposition. So to see it where it is now, I mean, it makes my heart proud, and it makes me proud of Tennessee.
Yeah, it really is exciting. I was telling you right before we went on, my first Pride was LA Pride. So we went out to see Del Shores. We stayed with him. And of course, yep, Del was just on the show, you know, a couple of episodes ago. But it was just, I remember because I had just recently come out and going to LA Pride, I'd always wanted to go to Nashville Pride, but just didn't. And going to LA, of course, LA Pride is huge, like Atlanta's.
Well, you jumped in the deep end.
So I was going to say. And so it was like, I mean, we got there in Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I mean, it's 4 big days of events and big name acts. I was just, and I remember it being so emotional because I was like, oh my gosh, all of these people are like me, and we're all celebrating together, and it was just a great experience. And then my first Nashville Pride was actually at Riverfront. Oh yeah. And it was when we were, you know, actually covering it. Yeah. And to be in Nashville and to be able to go to Pride, and again, like you said, and to say, yes, this is good. This is what we have. People understand it. They get it. But it was so needed too.
Oh, totally. And I mean, the difference between sort of seeing a few people celebrating on television, because prior to that, you know, you'd see the news reports, you'd see, and of course, at the time, it was more popular to show the more if I can say this, outlandish, sensational shots and views. But then when you're actually here and you're involved and you see it, you see the kids zone, and you see families, and you see strollers, and you see grandmas and grandpa, you know, you see everybody out enjoying themselves and celebrating. It really does. It kind of makes up for some of those other darker days that we have to suffer through as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, before we talk about Nashville Pride, but talking about darker days, you know, once marriage equality was here, and I remember the Pride after marriage equality was like historic. Remember, it was so celebratory and just felt so good. And I think at the time we thought, oh, smooth sailing from here on, or maybe not smooth sailing, but better sailing from here on out. Yeah. And now suddenly, all of those rights are starting to be threatened again. I know. Are you surprised?
A little bit. I mean, maybe that's naive in a way, but as you said, you know, to see that bit of progress happen, and you know, we're familiar with, you know, 1 step forward, 8 steps back. We get that. But to see that sort of come under attack, because I've always felt like, at least in this country, when something does become legal or something is a right, rarely does it ever sort of revert back or go the other way or sort of just be taken away. So I have some confidence that maybe this is a different situation than what is being currently talked about. But still, the fact that it's threatened, even if it isn't taken away, really, I can't imagine being a youngster now and sort of hearing that and thinking, oh, you know, like just being jockeyed around so much. It's just traumatizing, you know, and that's the part that hurts me. You know, we've lived long enough to know we'll be okay. We're here. We're not going anywhere. You know, we're going to be here. But to see those rights be just threatened and jeopardized for someone who maybe grew up expecting to get married, as we were saying before that we started taping, we necessarily didn't have that in our mindset, right? We never thought about that growing up. And for kids now that have been around long enough to think of that, that's traumatizing to think, you know, I might not be able to be seen as equal to my siblings or to my cousins or relatives. It's heartbreaking.
Do you remember, too, when marriage equality, the Pride after marriage equality was made legal, and again, I know these are the extremists, but at the time it was just interesting to me that some of the extremists on the other side were saying, well, now you've got marriage equality, you don't need Pride. Or we're going to get straight Pride. Why don't we have straight Pride? Well, what would you say to those people? I mean, even if they are the extremists.
Well, Pride, much like any other festival, is just a celebration of life, of being here. I mean, why would you say we don't need it? Like who's to say, well, you don't need a birthday party. You've already had 30 or 40 of them. You're done, right? You've had enough. So, I mean, that is silly in and of itself, but it's also a way, I think, of sort of trying to marginalize people still. It's like, well, you may have some of the same rights, but let's not talk about it. Let's, sort of like we're seeing now, we may have had some racism in the past, but well, we don't want to talk about it anymore. Let's just pretend like it didn't happen. And I feel like that's kind of putting you back in the closet in a way. It's like we were saying, 1 step forward, 8 step back.
And that's why I think it's more important than ever. I mean, we've got, midterm elections coming up.
Very much.
Everybody has to be vigilant about, we can't let up. You have to be vigilant. You have to make sure that you know who's saying what and where they stand on these issues, because again, they can be taken away if we're not careful.
Easily. And I think a lot of folks maybe don't think in those terms. They think, oh, well, that's not going to happen, and I've been supportive, and maybe my business has a gay straight alliance, or my school or my business has a gay group, or it's so prevalent now that people think, oh, but things happen. We've seen them happen. We've seen things happen drastically in the last few years. So, I mean, we just don't know. Staying engaged is so important, even though it can be just exhausting sometimes.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about Nashville Pride, because, I mean, have you seen the lineup?
I have.
Tanya Tucker, Walk the Moon, Michaela J., and so many entertainers on this. What do you think about that?
Well, it's like we're Music City, right? I mean, it makes sense. I don't want to say we finally have, because we've had great acts in the past. I mean, Lizzo's been here. We've had other people perform. But this year really feels like this is the best of Nashville Pride entertainment-wise. And then, of course, the Grand Marshals. I mean, I know you probably had a question about that, but I just thought seeing, TJ come in for that role as an entertainer,
right.
But then Leslie Jordan coming back and being here, that's gotten so many more people excited about coming that maybe have never come before.
And like you said, Leslie Jordan, he's been here before, but Leslie Jordan has never been as popular as he is now. During the pandemic, he'd exploded with his, his videos. Everybody was watching them on Instagram, and of course now he's on Call Me Kat, and just another one of his sitcoms. But I think it's so good because it calls more attention. Now, as we look at the festival, do you think there's going to be still a need for security and things like that? I mean, obviously you have security at any festival, but do you feel like people need to be aware even more so?
It never hurts to be aware. I mean, we've seen over the last few years, it's ebbed and flowed, the number of people protesting or saying something outside of the gates. I think the benefit of having it be sort of a gated entry and having access in that regard is it can keep people separated out. You can have a little bit more idea of that, but it just never hurts to pay attention, and don't discredit what they're there for. Pay attention. It's been interesting. I think it was a couple years ago, you may remember this, there were some protesters, and all of the I think it might have been the sisters, one of the groups kind of stood in front of them and started singing and blocking them and drowning them out. That is the best way to deal with them. Non-violent, non-threatening, just drown them out.
Right.
Just drown them out. They do have a right to be there.
And I think, and it was good that the sisters sang. I mean, that was great. I tell people often, because I know I've fallen in that same trap where when they're shouting, you start shouting back. It never, I mean, all it does is call more attention to them, and that's all they want.
Right, and hate never trumps hate.
It really doesn't. Now, I want to make sure everybody knows, too, because this is our Pride Preview Show. Make sure, if you don't have tickets, that you get tickets before they all sell out. You can do that at NashvillePride.org. June 25th, June 26th is when it is taking place, right there on your screen. So it's at Bicentennial, Capitol Mall, State Park. It's going to be one for the record books, incredible entertainment. So many people we know are going to be there. So we're looking forward to that. So
back in June, too.
Back in June. So the last one, really 2 years, we really haven't had, Pride. So this is going to be good to, the rain kind of called it off last year.
Literally, right?
Yeah, it really did. So great to be back in studio with you.
You too. Good to see you.
Okay, so we'll see you at Pride.
I'll be there.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us for our special Nashville Pride Preview Show. Hope to see you June 25th and 26th at Bicentennial, Capitol Mall, State Park in downtown Nashville. Till then, have a great evening.